lot of people are playing Centurion cards. And I don't really like this version of the deck because it adds in a whole bunch of conflicts. And you basically are playing a deck trying to resolve the paradox of your ceiling is higher at the cost of consistency, but at the same time, it's not just that there's a consistency hit. You actually can play around things better. So it's not just like theoretically your ceiling is higher if you don't get interrupted. You actually can choose different routes to play through different types of interruptions. Like, for example, if you think your opponent may have Droll, then the Centurion cards are much better at playing around that or like getting hit by Droll and then using Centurion plays because you only really search once in a Centurion combo, and if you have already drawn one of the cards, you may not need to search at all. So there are like relevant upsides that make the deck worth considering. But I want to go over what I think the two versions are that you have to choose between. The first is basically the smallest possible Centurion engine you can play. And the advantage of playing a smaller Centurion engine, which would be Stand Up, Trudea, Primera, and you don't technically have to play a Gargoyle, which is a brick. You do not want to draw this card, but the difference in what the combo does is substantial enough that I think if you have decided to play these cards, you probably have to play four as a small package. You can opt to play just these cards, and I'll show you in the combo where the difference matters with Gargoyle, like playing Gargoyle versus not playing Gargoyle. You could get away with these, but yeah, what you get for the ceiling is just a lot lower. And the main advantage to this version of the deck is that you can play enough hand traps to where it actually matters that you're playing hand traps. So for people who are new to ratios and Yu-Gi-Oh! And deck building, the general consensus on the number of hand traps that is appropriate if you're going to play a hand trap deck is 15. So we have 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 hand traps. You can go to 41 and play 15. You can take out Gargoyle and play 15. You can play 0 Centurion cards and play 15, 16, 17, 18 hand traps, which is generally what is considered appropriate in a Snake Eyes type meta. But the difference between Snake Eyes and Whitewoods or Centurion is that they have so many cards that are both starters and extenders that not only do they not have to draw as many engine pieces as we do, but they play through interruptions better. And so you don't want to find yourself in a hand trap war against that type of deck. So you actually have to play a decent amount of engine. It's quite hard to reduce your engine count in a deck like this and still be good. So anyhow, once you get close to 15 hand traps, you can say, all right, most of the time you're going to draw around 2 hand traps, and that is good enough against most decks. You're probably going to lose the majority of your matches, not like an extreme majority, but you're still probably going to lose against pure Snake Eyes just because it's the best deck. But especially if we get a ban list, if they get tuned down a little bit, which may not happen. We just saw today the OCG ban list dropped and Snake Eyes was given relatively minor hits, largely consistency hits again. So that's an overview of the hand trap version and the kind of ratios that you have to play. Let me quickly show you the other version. If you were playing a larger Centurion engine, so what does that actually mean? So we discussed that you should be playing Gargoyle. I should maybe move this down here so that's a bit less confusing. Um, so Gargoyle and Wake Up continue to add ceiling to the deck because Wake Up is a card that, well, it does have the condition that a monster card has to be face up in your spell and trap zone, and then you can special summon a token that's either level 4 or level 8. It's a non-tuner token. And so there are scenarios where you would prefer to go for Wake Up over Gargoyle. Wake Up has the extremely useful ability to, during the main phase, you can ban it during your main phase, sorry, not your opponent's main phase, only during your main phase, you can banish this card from your graveyard, send a Centurion card from your deck to the grave, except Wake Up. And the reason this is important is because you can dump Phalanx. And Phalanx is important because this is the card that plays around Nib. So let's say that you go full combo and your opponent nibs, you didn't set up anything that would help dodge it, like Little Knight, which is actually very useful in this deck for dodging stuff like nib. But let's say that you can't set up anything like that. There's no Rafflesia after siding for Gravedigger's Trap Hole or whatever that you went into with your toy engine, and let's just say you get nib. As long as you have dumped this card with Wake Up, or maybe you searched it or you hard drew it and you discarded it, because you have many very easy ways to do that. As long as this card reaches the graveyard, you can banish this card from your graveyard, then target a Centurion Synchro monster in your grave. Special summon it, but it loses 1500 attack. Now, the reason this plays around Nib is because when you get Nibbed and your Auxilia, which is usually what you go into in this version of the deck, or your Legatia, which is sometimes also an option for the combo, is in the grave, you bring it back, and you can do this in the end phase, and then you can still get the end phase effect. I'm sure everyone is already familiar with this, but during the end phase, you can place one of your non-synchro Centurion monsters is banished or in your graveyard in your spell and trap zone as a face-up continuous trap. So this way you still insulate your Calamities play, or if you're in the OCG, you'll be doing double Blazar. You can also do that in the TCG, but you can insulate your Calamities play with this simple card. Wake Up Centurion dumps this, or it is used as an extender, a conditional extender. So why would you play a larger engine over a smaller engine, and why would you not do that? Well, first of all, the larger engine, I'm including 3 Emblema Oath in here and only 1 field spell. Let's talk about these ratios for a second. The only good cards in the Centurion deck, there are only 2 cards that are good. It's Stand Up Centurion and Emblema Oath. Why are these other cards not good? You might think, well, Primera is a 1-card starter. If you summon this card, you search any card in your deck, and then you continue the combo. Or you may be thinking, what about Trudea? That's a 1-card combo too, right? You summon this card, and you go full combo for Calamities Lock. These are fake. These cards, these are not real in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! You do not get to summon a single card and full combo and expect that you're not going to be interrupted, first of all. Second of all, these cards are not extenders. If you draw Primera and Trudea, or doubles of these cards, which is less likely, but let's say you draw Trudea and Primera, or access to Trudea and Primera through some other ways like Emblema Oath or whatever, and you normal summon them, one of them, and you get impermed or stopped in some other part of the combo, you can't normal summon the other one. So these are not actually good cards. They are necessary cards. They are engine requirements. And if you're playing a pure Centurion deck, you would have to max out on these because you need to see your engine to play. Why is Stand Up good and why is Emblema Oath good? So this card, you choose one of 2 effects. Place a Centurion monster from your deck in your spell and trap zone as a continuous trap. And then there's a restriction for the rest of the turn. You can't special summon from the extra deck except for Centurion monsters. But this restriction is a very, very soft restriction because you can easily just meet that requirement and you're no longer locked. Or you can set a Centurion spell or trap directly from your deck. You should also remember, by the way, that Stand Up is a Centurion spell, which means that Emblema Oath can set Stand Up Centurion. These cards are largely interchangeable, but they're not just redundant, they're functionally redundant. Well, what does that mean? Let's say that you normal summon Primera and you get Imperm on the Primera, but you also have Oath. Oath is not the same as drawing Primera and Trudea, which are both normal summons, which brick you. This means, okay, now you can place the Trudea. Trudea can bring itself out, place itself back, and give you access to Gargoyle. So this card is functionally redundant because if you didn't draw any other engine, you can search your first engine piece and start playing, or if you did draw it, then you can extend. So this card is a starter and an extender in the best possible sense. It is a quick play. It gives you either a monster or a spell or trap. It's extremely flexible. This card is slightly less flexible because during your main phase, if this card was activated this turn, you can send a card from your hand to the graveyard. So there's a cost here. And this does not trigger the toy cards, for example, because this needs to be sent from the spell and trap zone. And then if you look at the Whitewoods cards, it has to be sent to the graveyard to activate a monster effect. So just remember that there isn't actually synergy between Stand Up and the toy engine or the Whitewood cards. But then there is a cost to this, which isn't the biggest deal in this deck because this deck does end up drawing and searching quite a lot of cards, but it doesn't matter in the beginning of your combo when you don't want to be interrupted and you don't want to have to choose between different options for your engine. You just want to be able to play and play through stuff with with extenders. So anyhow, you send a card from your hand to the graveyard, and you place a Centurion monster from your deck to your spell and trap zone as a continuous trap. And then obviously this is the one that allows you to synchro summon when a monster is special summoned. The thing about this card is that it's less flexible than this because it just places one and there's a cost to it, whereas there's just a small restriction on this card. So this card is better. If you have to choose between maxing out on this card or this card, you definitely play Oath. Um, if you wanted to play the highest number of starter extender cards in the Centurion engine, you would play 3 stand-up Centurion. And that gives you the highest possible access to these types of cards without increasing your normal summon count in the deck. And you already have Asteria at 3, which is like maybe the best card or one of the best cards in the deck. You have Sylve, which you don't actually want to normal summon, but there are some awkward hands where you do have to normal summon it to search like Legend so you can get access to Reset or Arcia or whatever. Um, and then if you're playing the bare minimum here, Trudea and Primera at 1, even if you ignore the Sylve, you're still at 5. And 5 is the number after which the general consensus is you don't want to add more normal summons to your deck unnecessarily. So you would only do that if you actually thought it would help, but at that point, you should just be playing more stand-ups. Now, the reason for not playing more stand-ups is you may have noticed if we, if we look at the hand trap version real quick again, because we were not playing additional cards there, we had enough space to get basically on the border of the 15 hand trap magical number. And obviously, you can tailor these based on your meta if you think it should be adjusted in any way. These are just sample non-engine cards. But in the scenario where we are on the larger Centurion engine, we have like 9 cards approximately for non-engine. And if you look up on a probability calculator, which you should always be doing every time you're building any deck or adjusting any ratios, the number of cards that you need if you are on Power Spell is around like 9 at the absolute lowest possible end, but more likely something like 10, 11, or maybe even 12. The reason for that is when you're around that 9 to 12-ish range, you're most likely, you're in a typical hand, going to draw one breaker. And if you draw one breaker, it has to be very high impact. Whereas if you have the same number of hand traps, those hand traps are going to be a lot less impactful. So you typically need to draw at least 2 hand traps, which is why you go for the 15 number for hand traps. Or in Snake Eyes, where they actually are fine drawing more hand traps, they can go up to 18 because they can risk drawing 3 hand traps, and the other 2 engine cards are strong enough to still be able to play through stuff. So if you were to go up to 3 stand-ups, you would be cutting down your non-engine space by another 2, and then you would be on like 7 power spell breakers, which is just begging to lose the dice roll going second because you either don't draw a breaker at all or you draw a breaker, but it's a breaker that they can play through. Like, just because you draw a Dark Ruler doesn't mean you're going to beat Snake Eyes. You might Dark Ruler their Appaloosa, but they still have the Temple to bring out the IP in your turn and go into whatever monster. So yeah, it's not like you can rely on this. So I feel like if you're going to be maxing out on the Centurion cards, this is probably a stretch, and this is using the best cards in the entire deck. So let me show you some combos now. I think there are 2 types of combos that I would like to show. There is something that shows you what the old Centurion combo would have done. So I'm going to run through this kind of quickly. And if you are confused by anything, you can ask in the comments and I'll explain it because I don't want to take too much time to go over this. Also, you should just pay attention to the wording on this card. Asteria says you can send a spell or trap from your hand or field to the grave. Special summon a light spellcaster tuner from your deck. So if you've not tested this version before, you may not know this, but because Primera is a light spellcaster tuner, it's one of the targets that Asteria can bring out. So it's another reason that you don't actually need to play more of this. And also, you should remember that you don't even need to do this for the combo. As long as you can go into a Synchro 12, which is extraordinarily easy for this deck, you can make Auxilla because it's generic, tuner, non-tuner monster, and that gets your entire Centurion combo going. But this is just to show that Asteria can access this card. So I'm just going to play through to show you what the end board looks like. I'm not showing you how to play through interruptions, which is very, very difficult without playing a real game. I do plan on showing replays with actual gameplay later, and that'll be better for going through like the thought process of how you're supposed to play the deck. I also am just making Gallant Granite here to show that you can still search the Nib, especially if you've drawn Valor or if you search Valor, to have the Nib Valor combo in your hand. So we get towards the end here, and let's check field. So in our graveyard, this is very important. We have our Ciela, and this means that whenever we have one of the level 4 tuners in grave, we have a free shuffle back, so it doesn't cost us anything on the field to bring itself out. Also through the combo, we've gotten access to Woes of the White Woods, and we have Diabel Fiendus of the White Woods on the field. So before we get to the Centurion cards, this is just to show that the Toy Box engine is in full rotation, right? Because this can place, doesn't matter what turn you're on, this will always get you access to your toy cards. And then when you have Woes and you have another card in your grave that gives you a body, or you have like Asteria that will be in rotation, you either at the bare minimum can get your Book of Eclipse, Silvera out, or sometimes I've actually found that it's more useful in decks that don't lose the Book of Eclipse as hard or in like weird game states to bring out Arciela again because you want to search another Valor. Yeah, like some decks can like force the Book of Moon sooner, and so you'd rather just have another Valor in hand, and that way they can't interact with it because it's not something on field or that they can just remove. Like they can't just Cosmic the White Woods or whatever. If you search another Valor, it's in your hand. Like there's nothing they can do to stop the Valor in hand. So anyhow, that engine is in full rotation. And if you played Centurion cards before, you know that in the end phase, what happens is the Legatia will place the Primera here. And even if you aren't using Gargoyle right now, you can bring out Trudea and you can bring out Primera and you can go into the Calamity Lock, or you can make Blazar if you're going to miss timing. So that is the old school Centurion combo, and it's very easy to do it. You can access it through Engine without drawing a single one of those cards. So now I will show you a slightly larger combo. Um, and I'm not saying that this is like the best possible end board that you can do, but just this is just to show that with a slightly larger engine, there's more stuff that you can do with the Centurion cards. But I should just double down and say that one of the impacts of having the Centurion cards and the larger ceiling is different routes of playing through things, and it's not easy to show this without playing through interruptions. But right now we're on unranked ladder because the cards are not out yet, and it's kind of hard to get good games. But I will release that for sure after info, and I may get some games, like ask someone to play some games and get some footage for that. Here also, by the way, I'm just showing that like these cards actually do matter if you're playing like Gargoyle and Wake Up for extenders, because it makes it a lot easier to climb into the cards that you want to climb into. Um, Let me let the combo finish first before I explain why this is kind of different. And I'll also go over some options. Like a bunch of this is very much optional, so let's check field here. One of the things that you can do with this deck if you're playing the Centurion cards, which is very different to Centurion before info, is you can make the Blazar before you pass turn. This is a very big deal because it means when you go to your opponent's turn, you can either make a second Blazar or you can make Calamities under the protection of the first Blazar. And the reason you can do that is you either make the Crimson Dragon again on your turn before you pass, or with the Centurion cards, you synchro into the Crimson Dragon on your opponent's turn. And so that's like super, super straightforward stuff. This card is what makes most things possible because you don't have to draw the Centurion cards. Otherwise, this would not be worth playing at all. It's just that you can access the Synchro 12s from the Whitewood stuff, so that's what makes this worth playing. Um, Also, you notice here that there's Phalanx in the grave. There are scenarios where maybe you think that the opponent doesn't have Nib, or you go for a line that puts a negate on field first, like with the Apple for 4 that I showed in a previous video, or Cosmic Blazar, and then obviously you know that they don't have Nib. And at that point, if you haven't committed to dumping the Phalanx, you can just keep it as an interruption. So they're like useful things that you can do with it there. Another thing that I found to be quite useful in this deck sometimes is to just make Chaos Angel on your turn 1. And it makes it very, very difficult for your opponent to stop the Calamities lock because Blazar is one thing, but it's not totally fail-proof. Whereas Chaos Angel, when it's made with a light monster, at least gives the effect that your synchro monsters are unaffected by monster effects activated by your opponent. So like they can't stop the Blazar, and they can't stop the Crimson Dragon even if they've baited the Blazar. So this card can be like if you're trying to go all in into a Calamity lock, or you want to go double Blazar because you think you need to play a resource game and the Calamities isn't going to win you the game. This card can be like quite useful even just turn one. I'm not saying that you should be making that as part of your standard combo. I've also found just going into Little Knight here is kind of useful for playing around things. And if you're going for the Granite play, which is not mutually exclusive with the Centurion combos, then you can like have the nib in your hand or nib Veiler if that's what you're searching, along with the Calamity Lock. And so you have diversified your interactions across so many different parts of your field that it's extremely hard for your opponent to play through it. And of course, the Wolves of the White Woods should always be here. You always want your resource game to be active by cycling through the Asteria and the Reset in your opponent's turn. So that's basically the end of the video. And I may go over some different versions of Whitewoods in the future. I don't think that pure Centurion is worth covering, but I may do it if there's anything interesting to show.